In the midst of the lights and flashes of the children's fashion show, the billionaire enjoys the event without imagining that his life is about to change, until a stranger in the audience points at him and the child on the runway calls him Daddy. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. It was a balmy afternoon in downtown Los Angeles when the first domino fell, setting this entire saga into motion. Jackson Price, one of the most influential billionaires in the country, had no idea that fate was about to toss him into the whirlwind of a lifetime. For years, Jackson had lived in the high-rise world of glittering penthouses and private jets, content with his role as the head of Price Industries, a global conglomerate touching everything from tech startups to luxury hotels. He was lauded in magazines as a business genius, a savvy investor, a man who always seemed to be one step ahead of any competition. And yet, despite all the success and accolades, Jackson carried a restlessness in his heart, an emptiness he could never quite articulate. On that particular Friday, his best friend and business partner, Eric Donovan, had nudged him to attend a children's fashion event. "It'll be good PR," Eric insisted, stepping into Jackson's vast corner office with flyers in hand. "We're sponsoring the show, remember?" Eric shrugged as though it were the simplest decision in the world. You show your face, sign some autographs, flash a smile. The press loves seeing the philanthropic side of Jackson Price. Jackson, with his usual calm demeanor, leaned back in his leather chair and studied the bright, cartoonish poster. He saw a swirl of pastel colors, the silhouettes of small children, and bold letters reading "Summer's Best Kids Fashion Show." Nothing about it intrigued him. He rarely attended social gatherings unless they were strictly tied to business deals. Yet something in Eric's voice suggested this was more than standard PR. So, after a resigned sigh, Jackson found himself saying, "All right, I'll drop by for an hour." That hour, as fate would have it, would alter the course of his life forever. The evening of the show, Jackson arrived at the makeshift runway set up in a chic auditorium. Parents filled the seats, beaming with pride, while backstage staff scurried around like busy bees. Spotlights illuminated a glossy catwalk where tiny models would soon parade in colorful ensembles. At first, Jackson simply took it in as a curious observer. He found the concept of kids' runway fashion both endearing and slightly strange. Where he came from, childhood was a time for carefree play, not for catwalks and cameras. But times had changed, or so the event organizers insisted. Some local children's charities would benefit from the proceeds, and so Jackson made sure to write an extra-large check to keep Price Industries' philanthropic reputation sparkling. He remained near the front row, not quite blending with the throng of excited parents, yet not distant enough to avoid the swirl of cameras. Photographers frequently sidled up to him, snapping pictures to feature in tomorrow's gossip columns. "Billionaire Jackson Price supports local kids' show." Toward the back of the auditorium, Natalie Roberts was having a very different experience. She stood in the shadows, heart pounding, her posture taut as a drawn bow. She had never imagined encountering Jackson Price again. Not after that tumultuous night 6 years earlier, one she had spent countless hours replaying in her mind, second-guessing her choices. As the mother of a little boy named Oliver, Natalie had worked tirelessly to shield her son from the harsh realities of the world, especially the realm of powerful people who might threaten their simple life. She'd left no trail, changed her phone number, and had told almost no one about Oliver's father. Life for them wasn't easy. She scraped by with 2 jobs, hustling to pay rent in a modest apartment, but it was safe, or at least it had been, until tonight. Oliver, all of 5 years old, stood backstage among a group of children practicing their final walks. He was a bright kid with a warm smile and an uncanny resemblance to the father he had never met. Thick, dark hair curled around his temples in the exact same pattern Jackson's had, and the shape of his eyes betrayed his heritage. Yet in Oliver's mind, his mother was the center of his universe. He never asked about a dad, because that conversation was one Natalie had never dared to begin. Yet here they were, drawn by a local friend who ran a kids' boutique, and promised Oliver that participating in a small fashion show would be fun and a chance to make new friends. Oliver was too excited to decline. Natalie's breath caught when she spotted Jackson Price stepping into the venue. Her first instinct was to grab Oliver and run out the back door before the show even started, but it was too late. Cameras were rolling, music was cued, and the children were minutes away from stepping onto the catwalk. The next best thing was to pray that Jackson wouldn't notice them, or that if he did, he would remain oblivious to the truth. She felt a strange mix of longing, fear, and regret swirl in her chest. She had never told Jackson about Oliver, but seeing him again brought a flood of old emotions. If their eyes locked, would he recognize her? Back in the front row, Jackson tapped his foot, checking the time on his phone. He was already planning his exit strategy, maybe slip away right after a token handshake with the event organizer. However, the lights dimmed before he could make his quiet escape. The music began, a sweet, playful tune, and the first group of little models came out, each child proudly strutting down the catwalk in vibrant outfits. Admittedly, it was charming to see so much innocence and unbridled confidence. Jackson felt a smile tug at his usually stoic face. One by one, the tiny fashionistas paraded down the runway. Then a hush fell over the crowd as Oliver stepped forward. The boy wore a miniature tailored suit, navy blue with a playful polka dot bow tie. A single bright spotlight caught the highlights in his dark hair and illuminated a face so startlingly familiar that Jackson stood up from his seat. Everything else in the auditorium receded into the background. The music, the applause, the cameras. Jackson's heart hammered. He had no idea who the child was, but something about the boy's expression, those shining eyes, and the shape of his smile struck a chord deep within him. An inexplicable connection made Jackson's chest tighten. It was as if he were gazing into a mirror from the past, seeing a reflection of himself at that same innocent age. Oliver blinked against the bright lights and walked forward, oblivious to the thunderous beating of Jackson's heart. In the wings, Natalie trembled, seeing Jackson's reaction. She whispered under her breath, "Oh God, please don't realize, please." But as Oliver reached the end of the runway, someone in the crowd cheered, "Look at that little model!" And Oliver beamed, stepping gracefully in a way that looked almost too polished for a 5-year-old. Jackson's mind raced. Why does this child look so much like me? Is it just a trick of the lights? Some improbable coincidence? The more he watched Oliver, the stronger the suspicion grew. Then Oliver pivoted, giving a final wave to the crowd. His gaze landed briefly on Jackson. For a moment, neither father nor son knew their true connection, but they both felt a jolt of recognition that neither could describe. A wave of conflicting feelings rolled through Jackson. Could this be? No, that's impossible. I'd know if I had a son, wouldn't I? He recalled certain fleeting encounters from years ago. A name, a face. Could one of them have led to a child he never knew? The boy's features were too undeniably close to Jackson's own for him to brush it off as chance. The crowd's applause surged as Oliver returned backstage, leaving Jackson rooted in place with a swirling sense of wonder and dread. Meanwhile, off to the side, a young stagehand signaled for the next group of children to line up. But Natalie couldn't breathe. She saw the look in Jackson's eyes. He was definitely suspicious. She had prepared herself for any scenario except this. Another stagehand gave her a subtle nod, indicating Oliver needed a quick change. This was her chance. She grabbed Oliver's hand the moment he stepped backstage, determination setting her face. "Honey, let's go," she whispered urgently. "But Mom," Oliver started, confused. "We still have to do the final walk." She couldn't let him go out there again. Not with Jackson Price mere steps away from unearthing the biggest secret of her life. But fate wouldn't let her slip away so easily. Halfway through the corridor behind the stage, she collided with someone carrying a rack of costumes, stumbling and losing precious seconds. At the same time, the event organizer called for Oliver to return to the runway for a group bow. Cameras flashed, capturing Jackson in the front row, his expression a mixture of curiosity and overwhelming emotion. Just then, in a moment of pure desperation, Natalie met Jackson's gaze across the swirl of children and busy staff. Their eyes locked. She saw the question burning within him, saw him starting to move toward them as though in a trance. With her heart pounding in her ears, she did the only thing she could think of. She pointed directly at Jackson in a silent plea for understanding, like someone revealing a final, unavoidable truth. He froze, astonishment etched across his features, and in that electrifying second, the hush that fell over them both was deafening. Time seemed to hang in the air. Every camera, every spectator, every glimmer of stage light faded into the background as the unspoken realization dawned in Jackson's mind. Natalie pulled Oliver closer, eyes brimming with tears. How could she have guessed that, on a night meant for children's laughter and innocent games, a father would discover his own son in the most public and dramatic way possible? A moment of pure silence enveloped the bustling children's show, as if the very air had been sucked out of the auditorium. Jackson Price stood frozen, one hand still clutching the back of a chair. His gaze never left Natalie and the young boy who clung to her side. The world around them became a swirl of muted colors and hushed murmurs, everything overshadowed by the revelation that crackled between them. Natalie could barely breathe. She knew from the look on Jackson's face that he had connected the dots. Oliver, oblivious to the adult's turmoil, simply peered up at his mother and then toward Jackson, curiosity glimmering in his eyes. For 5 years she had carried this secret on her own. She had told no one of Oliver's paternity, not friends, not family. It had been safer that way. Yet here they all were, center stage, with the cameras still rolling and the audience unsettled by the sudden break in the show's flow. On reflex, Natalie shielded Oliver protectively. She opened her mouth, perhaps to speak or to plead, but no words came out. Her heart galloped as if trying to rip free from her rib cage. It was Jackson who took the first step. He approached slowly, weaving through the racks of miniature outfits and props, pushing aside a flustered event staff member who tried to ask if he was all right. The crowd parted for him like a wave, uncertain of whether a spectacle was about to unfold. "Natalie?" Jackson's voice cracked with a quiet astonishment. "Is that—" He couldn't bring himself to finish the question. His eyes flicked toward Oliver, whose wide brown gaze stared back with open curiosity. Natalie swallowed the knot in her throat and nodded almost imperceptibly. There was no point in lying, no chance to conjure a fake explanation. The truth was written in Oliver's face, in the same wavy hair and that faint dimple on the left cheek, features that mirrored Jackson's own. "Jackson," she whispered at last, voice trembling, "we need to talk, but not here." He nodded, letting out a shaky breath that he seemed to have been holding for an eternity. Together they looked around, as if remembering they were surrounded by spectators. Cameras still flashed. Some onlookers whispered while others pointed. The event's host, trying desperately to salvage the show's schedule, lowered the music and signaled for an intermission. A flustered announcer attempted to keep the audience calm, stepping onto the stage to assure them there would be a short break. Oliver tugged on his mom's sleeve. "Mom, am I in trouble?" he asked in a small, wavering voice. Natalie's heart shattered to hear the fear in her son's question. "No, honey," she managed, forcing a reassuring tone. "You're not in trouble. Let's step outside for some air." She carefully guided Oliver, gesturing for Jackson to follow. Within minutes, they slipped through an employee exit, away from the swirling chaos of the runway. The door opened onto a narrow alley lit by weak fluorescent bulbs. They stood there, the three of them, the hum of traffic in the distance reminding them that life continued on the other side of this momentous event. Jackson removed his jacket and crouched down to Oliver's eye level, carefully taking in every detail of the boy's face. He noticed the faint splash of freckles across his nose, the slight wave in his hair, the shape of his lips. "Hey, buddy," Jackson said softly, trying not to spook him. "I'm Jackson. What's your name?" "Oliver," the boy replied, glancing between his mother and this unfamiliar yet oddly comforting stranger. "Mommy said we had to leave before the last walk. I thought maybe I did something bad." Jackson's heart twisted. "No, you didn't do anything wrong," he said, nodding firmly. "Sometimes grown-ups they have things they need to figure out." Oliver nodded, though he seemed uncertain. He looked at Natalie. "Can we go home now?" Natalie pressed a hand gently to Oliver's back. "Yeah, sweetie. We'll go soon. Just let me talk to Mr. Jackson for a second." At the mention of Mr. Jackson, the billionaire looked up at Natalie, feeling a pang of regret that she still treated him with such distance. The last time they had been together, years ago, in a swirl of confusion and fleeting passion, was so far removed from the present. She'd clearly built walls to protect herself and her child. And while he was consumed with questions, Jackson understood that the alley was no place to demand answers. Behind them, a door slammed as one of the event photographers poked his head out, hoping to snap a quick shot. Immediately, Jackson rose to his full height, an air of protectiveness flaring in him. He stepped forward, effectively blocking the photographer's line of sight to Natalie and Oliver. "No pictures," Jackson commanded in a quiet but unmistakably authoritative voice. "Delete whatever you took." The photographer, intimidated by the billionaire's stare, stammered something and disappeared back inside. Only then did Jackson turn again to face Natalie. "Let's get them out of here," he said, gesturing to Oliver. "We can figure something out, away from this madness." Natalie nodded in relief. She realized that no matter how complicated her relationship was with Jackson, at this moment her instincts to protect Oliver matched Jackson's protective stance. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him enough to navigate this chaos, if only for Oliver's sake. Within minutes, Natalie led them to her car parked on a side street, a modest older sedan. It struck Jackson as a stark contrast to the world of luxury he inhabited. He offered to give them both a ride in his company car, but Natalie insisted they were fine. In truth, she still couldn't stomach the idea of being that close to him without a plan. "Let me follow you home," Jackson offered, carefully measuring her reaction. I just want to talk. I'm not trying to push, but please." Oliver, sensing something adult and complicated was happening, had climbed quietly into the back seat of Natalie's car. He pressed his face to the window. "Mom? Is he coming with us?" Natalie stood by the driver's door, torn between caution and the flutter of old feelings that threatened to resurface. She looked into Jackson's eyes, searching for any sign of manipulation or anger. Instead, she found a tremulous sincerity she'd never quite seen before. "All right," she finally said, though her tone quivered. "You can follow us, but no cameras, no press. If things get out of hand, I'm asking you to leave." Jackson nodded. Agreed. They pulled away from the curb, Natalie in her aging sedan, Jackson trailing behind in his sleek black SUV. The two vehicles couldn't have been more different, a symbol of how separate their worlds had become. The drive to Natalie's apartment felt like an eternity for Jackson. His thoughts tumbled over one another. How had he never known about Oliver? Why hadn't Natalie reached out? Did she fear his reaction, or had she doubted whether he'd accept the child? He gripped the steering wheel, weaving through the city streets, the gold and crimson lights of passing cars reflecting in his rearview mirror. The pang in his chest deepened each time he remembered the heartbreak shining in Natalie's eyes. At last, they reached a modest complex in a quieter part of town. The paint was chipped in places, and the surrounding neighborhood was worlds away from the opulent enclaves Jackson was used to. Still, the place looked cozy and safe enough. a humble, lived-in atmosphere that Jackson found strangely comforting. He parked, stepped out, and waited near the entrance as Natalie escorted Oliver inside. She paused at the threshold, turning back to gesture for Jackson to come in. Her posture was guarded, but the small gesture was an olive branch of sorts. Jackson followed, his heart pounding. What would he see inside? Oliver dashed ahead, forgetting the tension for a moment, excitedly telling them about the new toy he got as a reward for participating in the show. He ran to his room, barely bigger than a walk-in closet in Jackson's eyes, and rummaged for the toy. Meanwhile, Natalie guided Jackson into a small living area, the walls adorned with crayon drawings and a few family photos, though none revealed any father figure. For a few seconds, they stood in awkward silence. Jackson could still smell the faint hint of perfume on Natalie's clothes, the same fragrance that haunted his memory for years. She cleared her throat, settling on a worn sofa, and motioned for him to do the same. "You probably have 1,000 questions," she began quietly, folding her hands in her lap. "I'll try to answer them. Just, please, keep your voice down. Oliver doesn't need to hear us argue." Jackson pressed his lips together. "I'm not looking for a fight. I want to understand how any of this happened without me knowing. I deserve to know." A flash of pain crossed Natalie's features. She exhaled slowly, as though summoning courage. "All right," she said. "I'll explain, but it's not a simple story." Jackson braced himself, every muscle tensed as if expecting a tidal wave. And in many ways, that was precisely what Natalie's next words would feel like. Because once she revealed the truth behind Oliver's secret parentage, why she'd kept the news from him all these years, there would be no turning back. Nightfall cast gentle shadows across the living room, the dull glow of a single lamp illuminating the modest space. Jackson Price found himself perched on the edge of the worn sofa, shoulders hunched in anticipation. Across from him sat Natalie Roberts, hands clasped in her lap, as though she were trying to hold herself together. The hum of a refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen provided a steady background noise, mixing with the faint sound of Oliver playing in his small bedroom. Natalie swallowed hard, gaze drifting toward the thin wall that separated them from her child. "It wasn't some grand conspiracy," she began, voice trembling slightly. "In the beginning, I didn't even know I was pregnant. By the time I found out, I'd already lost touch with you. And I was scared, Jackson." He watched her carefully, an unreadable look flickering across his face. "Scared of me?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Not you specifically. I was scared of what your life represented. Private jets, billion-dollar deals, a world so far removed from my own. And there were other factors, too." She hesitated, struggling for the right words. I didn't think you'd want him." Jackson's chest tightened. "You don't think I'd want my own child?" He wasn't angry, more stunned. "Nat, I'm not heartless. If you had told me—" "And then what?" she interjected, voice catching. "Would you have asked me to move into your penthouse? To suddenly become a Price and face all the attention and judgment? I was just a nobody, Jackson. I had a part-time job back then, trying to get my graphic design career off the ground, bouncing from one tiny apartment to another. We'd barely known each other. I was terrified." Jackson let out a slow exhale, his mind reeling with the revelation of it all. He recalled the night they'd first met, an impulsive spark at a mutual acquaintance's party, leading to a brief romance that ended far too abruptly. He never thought that their final goodbye would come with lifelong consequences. "You could have called," he said at last. "I would have helped." Natalie's brow furrowed. "That's exactly what I didn't want. Help, charity. I'd seen what your circle was like. The socialites, the endless paparazzi, the cynics on talk shows who love nothing more than to tear down any woman who gets close to someone rich or powerful. And I knew you were busy building your empire, had your own life. She paused, eyes filling with tears. "I made the call to do it on my own." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, attempting to process her words. Part of him felt wounded that she'd assumed the worst, yet another part understood the lens through which she viewed his life. "If I had known," he murmured, "I'd have wanted to be there, for everything. The ultrasounds, the birth, his first steps." Tears slid down Natalie's cheeks before she could stop them. Guilt and regret mingled in her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. "I thought I was doing what was best for Oliver. I didn't want him to become some tabloid headline, and I guess I was protecting myself too. From rejection." Jackson moved closer on the sofa, lowering his voice instinctively as though afraid Oliver might overhear. "He's my son," he said, the words tumbling out with equal parts wonder and heartbreak. "He looks exactly like me at that age. I can't believe I've missed 5 whole years of his life." He swallowed, lips pressing into a pained line. "I can't get that time back." Natalie lowered her head. She had no rebuttal, no way to undo the past or the decisions that led them here. The remorse she'd carried for so long flared fiercely now, burning her from within. "I know," she finally managed, her voice weighed down by sorrow. "All I can say is, I'm sorry." He nodded slowly, tears glinting in his own eyes. "I accept your apology," he murmured, though a tremor in his voice betrayed the depth of his hurt. "But now what? We have a child, Natalie, a child who doesn't even know who I am." She bit her lip, steeling herself. "We've gotten by, Oliver and me. He's a happy kid. He has friends at preschool. He plays soccer in the park on Saturdays. I'm not rich, but I do what I can. He's never asked about his dad because I never brought it up. I thought, maybe, if he's older, I'd tell him. But after tonight, I guess we can't hide anymore." Jackson gazed at her, a faint spark of anger flaring. "You weren't just hiding from the tabloids. You were hiding from me." Natalie wiped her eyes. "Yeah, I suppose I was." Her honesty was raw, cutting to the bone. A short lull in conversation followed, filled only by distant giggles from Oliver's room. Jackson glanced toward the hallway, imagining his son in there, blissfully unaware of how precariously their world had just shifted. Slowly, he gathered his composure. "I'd like to meet him properly, talk to him, spend time with him." Natalie stiffened. "All at once? He's only 5, Jackson. He won't understand if I tell him you're his father out of the blue." "I know," Jackson said gently. "We have to ease him into it, let him see me around, get comfortable, but I don't want to waste another day. I want him to know who I am." She studied his face, measuring whether she could fully trust his intentions. So much had changed, yet Jackson seemed earnest. In truth, she'd never expected him to want fatherhood or to yearn for it so deeply. She expected anger, legal threats, accusations, but he was calm, albeit visibly wounded. "We'll do it step by step," she agreed finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson exhaled in relief, a quiet smile flickering across his lips. "Thank you. And I can help. With whatever you need. I've missed 5 years. Let me make up for lost time. School fees, medical expenses, anything. And I'd like to see Oliver regularly, if that's all right." He paused, adding more quietly, "I owe it to him." Before Natalie could respond, Oliver trotted into the living area, clutching a little action figure in his hand. "Mom, can I—" He stopped, noticing Jackson sitting there, and that same inquisitive look returned to his face. "Hi," he said shyly, glancing down at his feet. "Are you still here?" Jackson's smile broadened. He noticed how Oliver's cheeks pinked slightly, just like his own used to whenever he felt anxious. "Hey, buddy," Jackson greeted in a gentle tone. "I hope it's okay that I stayed. I wanted to say goodnight to you." Oliver shrugged, stepping forward with a child's open trust. "Mom always reads me a story before bed," he announced, fiddling with the little toy. "Do you read stories?" "Sometimes," Jackson replied, softly casting a quick look at Natalie for permission. She offered him a hesitant nod, her eyes welling with emotion. In that moment, Oliver stretched out a small hand, offering Jackson the action figure, an unspoken invitation. Jackson took it gingerly, heart brimming with awe. It was such a tiny gesture but signified a huge leap in acceptance. "Thanks," he whispered, voice catching in his throat. Natalie observed them, tears silently slipping down her cheeks. She'd pictured 1,000 different ways this could have played out, but never had she expected Oliver to take to Jackson so openly, so quickly. Was it some instinctual bond, or was Oliver simply excited to see someone new? Whatever it was, the sight of them together made her chest tighten with a strange blend of hope and fear. "I think it's time for bed, sweetheart," Natalie said after a beat. "You have school tomorrow, remember?" Oliver rubbed his eyes and nodded. "'Kay, Mom." He glanced again at Jackson. "Will you be here tomorrow too?" he asked innocently. A lump formed in Jackson's throat. "I can be," he answered, looking at Natalie for confirmation. "If it's all right with you and your mom." Oliver's sleepy gaze shifted to Natalie, who forced a small smile. "We'll talk about it," she told him gently, reaching out to ruffle his hair. "Now go brush your teeth." He scampered off, leaving the two adults in a hush of overlapping emotions. Jackson clutched the small toy in his hand, staring down at it as though it were the most precious object in the world. The gravity of everything hit him anew. He had a son, and that son was now inches away, trusting and vulnerable. "How about you come by tomorrow evening?" Natalie ventured at last, quietly. "We can figure out some schedule. Something that makes sense so Oliver isn't overwhelmed." Jackson nodded. "Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you." A fragile peace seemed to settle between them. They both knew the road ahead would be tricky, tangled in old wounds, new realities, and the constant specter of Jackson's public life. But for now, they had a starting point. Oliver needed both of them, and neither was willing to stand in the way of what was best for him. After exchanging phone numbers, an awkward formality given their history, Jackson rose to leave. They walked to the door, neither entirely sure how to end this pivotal night. Finally, he mustered a soft smile. "I appreciate you letting me stay and talk." She met his gaze, eyes shimmering. "I appreciate that you understand why I did what I did," she replied, voice trembling with sincerity. "Doesn't mean it was right, but it's where we are." He lingered for a moment as though tempted to say more, but then simply nodded and stepped outside. As she closed the door behind him, Natalie pressed her forehead against the wood, breathing heavily. She felt both relief and an odd sense of foreboding. Her carefully guarded secret had been exposed, and she had no idea what ripple effects would follow. Outside, Jackson stood on the pavement, the crisp night air cooling his flushed face. He peered up at the second-floor window where a soft light shone. Oliver's room, no doubt. Slowly, he breathed in and out, grappling with the enormity of the discovery. Tomorrow would mark the start of his new reality, one that would find him balancing boardrooms and bedtime stories in ways he never could have envisioned. After another moment spent in quiet reflection, Jackson climbed into his SUV and drove away, haunted by the memory of a small hand offering him a toy. He promised himself that this time he wouldn't let the moments slip through his fingers. He would fight for his son, and maybe, in some unspoken corner of his heart, fight for the second chance he never imagined wanting so badly. Morning brought both anxiety and hope to Natalie's modest apartment. The sun filtered through Oliver's bedroom window, casting soft beams on the walls that were decorated with playful decals of rocket ships. A small bed, strewn with a dinosaur-themed comforter, occupied the center of the room where Oliver still slept soundly, face buried into his pillow. In the next room, Natalie sat at the kitchen table, a half-finished cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. She'd barely slept, heart and mind a swirl of conflicting thoughts. Occasionally, she glanced at her phone lying on the table. Jackson had texted her late in the night, just a simple, "Thank you again," I'll be in touch tomorrow. No demands, no threats, just an understated warmth that both comforted and unsettled her. Part of her still couldn't shake the dread of what might happen if Jackson's powerful circle discovered Oliver's existence. The press, his corporate adversaries. She'd done her best to live a quiet life with her son, free from the weight of high society's glare, and she feared that once Pandora's box was opened, there would be no going back. Yet in the hours since telling Jackson the truth, she felt a strange sense of relief. 5 years of secrets and guilt had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Even in their short conversation, she'd glimpsed a side of Jackson that was genuinely concerned for Oliver's welfare. He'd chosen compassion over anger. That had to count for something. Before she could lose herself in more anxious thoughts, the patter of little feet emerged from the hallway. Oliver appeared, hair rumpled from sleep, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. "Mommy," he said through a yawn, "can I have cereal?" She rose quickly, forcing a smile onto her face. "Of course, sweetie." As she poured cereal into a bowl, she heard him shuffle into a chair at the small kitchen table. Oliver blinked, still shaking off the last remnants of sleep. "That man from last night, is he your friend?" he asked. His voice carried the simple, direct curiosity that only a child could have. Natalie's hands paused over the milk carton. "Kind of," she answered slowly. "He's someone I used to know, and we're reconnecting. Remember I told you we'd talk about it?" Oliver accepted this without much fuss, more interested in his cereal. But the question cast a shadow over Natalie's morning. She realized she needed a plan to help Oliver understand who Jackson truly was, without overwhelming him. She also recognized that Jackson might have an entirely different plan, one where he started integrating into Oliver's life quickly. By the time Oliver finished his breakfast and hurried off to get ready for kindergarten, Natalie's phone buzzed. She reached for it with a trembling hand, half expecting to see Jackson's name. Instead, the screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped a beat, bracing for some kind of press inquiry or a call from a tabloid. Taking a breath, she answered. "Hello? Hi, is this Natalie Roberts?" The voice was female, polite but businesslike. "My name is Julia Watson. I work in corporate communications at Price Industries. Would you have a minute to speak?" Natalie's pulse fluttered in her throat. Yes, she said tentatively, eyes drifting toward Oliver's bedroom door. She mouthed to him that she'd be just a moment stepping into the hallway so he wouldn't overhear. "Apologies for calling so early," Julia continued. "I was asked by Mr. Jackson Price to reach out. He wants to ensure you have his personal contact details. Also, he asked me to let you know, discreetly, that any personal matters concerning you and him will remain strictly confidential at the company. He has no intention of letting this become public knowledge unless you're comfortable." The breath she'd been holding whooshed out in relief. "Oh, I see," Natalie managed, brow creasing. She found it odd that Jackson had asked an employee to make this call, but maybe it was his attempt at showing he was serious about keeping things private. Julia's tone softened. "I understand this might be unexpected, but I want to assure you, Miss Roberts, we handle a lot of sensitive matters for Mr. Price. He's very concerned about your privacy and your son's well-being." She paused. "I've sent you an email with my direct line and Jackson's personal number. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Natalie thanked her and hung up, unsettled yet somewhat comforted. It was nice to know Jackson was taking steps to protect Oliver. At the same time, she wasn't sure how to navigate the formality of it all. PR people, emails, direct lines. That was Jackson's world, not hers. A short while later, after dropping Oliver at kindergarten, she felt her phone vibrate again. This time, the caller ID clearly read Jackson Price. Her stomach flipped. With sweaty palms, she answered, "Natalie." His voice filled the line, warm and concerned. "Good morning. I hope Julia's call didn't alarm you." She let out a breathy laugh. "Alarmed, yes, but also relieved." I appreciate what you're doing, Jackson. He seemed to consider her response for a moment. I just want to make sure you and Oliver don't feel exposed. The last thing I want is the press sniffing around. If it helps ease your worries, I have a very small circle of trusted employees. Julia is one of them. That's why I asked her to get in touch. She handles personal matters quietly and efficiently. Natalie nodded, despite him not being able to see. Thank you. I really do mean that. Her gaze flicked around her living room, wondering how quickly everything could change if word got out that the billionaire Jackson Price had a child living here. She pictured paparazzi camping on the curb, Oliver's private life dissected. It made her queasy. How's Oliver this morning? He asked, in a tone tinged with genuine warmth. Good. Happy as can be. We didn't have any deep talks yet, but he asked about you. I told him we're friends. She trailed off, unsure if that was the right term. There was a pause, during which Jackson likely processed the label. That's okay, he said at last, carefully. We can figure out how to tell him the truth little by little. I was hoping I could see him again soon, maybe this evening, like we said. We could all have dinner, or if that's too fast, we could do something else. Natalie's first instinct was to say yes. Part of her felt guilty for having kept them apart so long. Dinner sounds like a good start, she answered. I can cook something here if you'd like. I don't have a fancy kitchen, but that would be perfect, he interjected, sounding almost eager. I'll bring a few groceries if that's all right. I'd love to help. Her cheeks warmed. She had a fleeting memory of the Jackson she'd known years ago, who hardly knew how to boil water, joking about the extravagance of personal chefs. The idea of him stepping into her cramped kitchen was comical and strangely heartwarming. Sure, she agreed. Just let me know what time. Oliver's out of kindergarten around 3 p.m. and I get off work at 5. I can pick him up, come home, and maybe by 6:30 we can be ready. 6:30 it is, Jackson said, relief seeping into his tone. Thank you, Natalie, truly. They ended the call with a mutual sense of cautious optimism. Afterward, Natalie slumped onto her sofa, pressing her phone to her chest. Had she really just invited Jackson Price over for a casual family dinner? She wondered if this was the first step in bridging 5 years of distance, or the beginning of a fresh onslaught of complications she wasn't prepared to handle. The day seemed to drag, and by late afternoon Natalie found herself scanning the grocery aisle for anything that might impress a billionaire's palate without appearing pretentious. She eventually settled on basics: chicken breasts, fresh vegetables, some pasta. She also grabbed a small box of crayons for Oliver, suspecting he'd need a distraction once Jackson arrived. Racing home, she tidied the living room, whisked away random clutter, and nervously changed her shirt 3 times. She didn't want to overdo it, but she also didn't want to look disheveled. Oliver noticed her fussing, picking up on the tension in the air. "Why are you cleaning so much, Mom?" he asked, holding his stuffed dinosaur. "Did you invite my teacher or something?" She mustered a laugh. "No, honey, just a friend. Remember that man from last night? He's coming over for dinner." Oliver's eyes brightened. "He reads stories," he announced, a childish sense of wonder in his voice. "Maybe he'll read one to me tonight." Natalie's heart lurched. "Maybe," she echoed, suddenly remembering the bedtime ritual he and Jackson had almost begun the night before. She placed a hand on his cheek, silently marveling at how naturally Oliver seemed to accept visitors into his life. Would he be so welcoming once he learned the man was his father? At exactly 6:28 p.m., a familiar black SUV pulled up outside. Natalie's heart galloped as she heard a car door shut and footsteps ascending the short flight of stairs. Then came a knock. She hurried to open it, trying to compose herself. Jackson stood there wearing a simple dress shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark jeans, a far cry from the tailored suits that often graced business magazines. He offered a nervous smile and held up a grocery bag. "I brought some things. Hope I'm not stepping on your meal plan." Her gaze flicked to the bag. "That's perfect. Come in." She stepped aside, letting him take in the small apartment once more. His eyes swept the tidied surfaces, the fresh flowers she'd placed in a vase, an obvious attempt to make the space seem more inviting. "Thanks for having me," he murmured, setting down the bag on the kitchen counter. Oliver peeked out from behind the sofa. He squealed, "Hi!" the moment he recognized Jackson. "Did you bring a story?" Jackson chuckled. "I did, actually," he said, patting the outer pocket of his laptop bag. "Thought we could read it after dinner. Sound good?" Oliver grinned, bounding closer to rummage through the bag. Natalie cleared her throat. "Hey, let's let Jackson settle in, okay, bud?" Oliver obeyed with a sheepish laugh, and Jackson used the moment to carefully take out the groceries he'd brought, some fresh herbs, a baguette, an assortment of cheeses, and a bottle of decent white wine. Natalie watched, mildly overwhelmed. "Wow, you didn't have to bring all this. I only planned a simple meal." He shrugged, eyes crinkling with warmth. "I've been trying to learn to cook a bit. Figured tonight was a good time to practice. If you'll let me help." A quiet moment passed between them, both recalling how improbable this scene would have felt just days ago. With a nod, she moved aside to grant him space at the tiny counter. "Sure," she said softly. "We can do it together." While Natalie washed vegetables, Jackson chopped herbs, the two of them navigating the small kitchen in an unexpectedly harmonious dance. Oliver hovered, occasionally asking to help stir or to count how many carrots they had. Laughter punctuated the air whenever Oliver's curious remarks led to them almost bumping elbows, reminding them there was joy even in the midst of their complicated emotions. They prepared a simple but comforting meal: herbed chicken, roasted vegetables, and a small side of pasta for Oliver. The smell of garlic and rosemary drifted through the apartment, mixing with the sound of Oliver's chatter. Once everything was in the oven, Jackson wiped his hands on a dish towel, glancing around as though seeing the place anew. He noted the frames on a nearby shelf, mostly pictures of Oliver at different ages, learning to crawl, grinning in a tiny Halloween costume, or wearing a kindergarten graduation cap. One frame featured a younger Natalie, arms around a giggling toddler Oliver. Jackson reached out a tentative hand to trace the edge of the frame. "I wish I'd been there," he murmured, a note of sadness in his voice. Natalie joined him, offering a half smile. "He's had a good life so far," she replied gently. "He hasn't lacked for love, I promise you that." Jackson returned her gaze, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. "I can tell. He's happy, trusting. You've done an amazing job with him." Before she could respond, the timer dinged, announcing dinner was ready. As if on cue, Oliver rushed up. "Is it done, Mom? I'm hungry," he declared, pressing a hand to his stomach. "Perfect timing," Natalie said, turning back to the kitchen. She retrieved the tray from the oven while Jackson helped set the table. It wasn't much, just a small round table with 3 mismatched chairs, but tonight it felt like the center of something important. Oliver hopped into his seat, and after a quick swirl of activity, the 3 of them settled with steaming plates. Oliver dug in eagerly, complimenting the chicken with a dramatic yum that made both adults laugh. Jackson tasted his first bite, nodding in approval. "This is great," he said, looking at Natalie with genuine gratitude. They chatted about Oliver's day at kindergarten, the shapes he drew, the songs he sang. Jackson listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking polite questions that made Oliver light up with enthusiasm. The child's chatter filled the air, bridging the awkward gaps that might have lingered otherwise. After the meal, Oliver insisted on showing Jackson his favorite dinosaur figurines. Jackson followed him into the living room, kneeling beside the coffee table while Oliver explained which dinosaur was the fastest, which had the biggest teeth. Natalie, clearing the plates, watched from the kitchen, heart tightening at the sight. In 5 years, she'd never pictured seeing them together like this. It felt right and terrifying all at once. Soon enough, bedtime approached. Oliver stifled a yawn, but he perked up when Jackson revealed the storybook he'd brought, an illustrated tale of a brave kitten exploring the city. Oliver climbed onto the sofa, patting the cushion beside him to invite Jackson to read. Natalie lingered behind, letting them have this moment. She couldn't help noticing how Oliver leaned into Jackson's shoulder as the story progressed. The sound of Jackson's low, gentle narration lulled the child. By the final page, Oliver's eyelids drooped heavily. "Think he's out," Jackson whispered, carefully closing the book. True enough, Oliver had fallen asleep, head resting against Jackson's arm. For a few seconds, Jackson sat perfectly still, his expression awash in tenderness and something akin to awe. Natalie tiptoed closer. "Here," she whispered, gesturing for him to hand Oliver over gently. Jackson gathered the boy in his arms, lifting him as though he weighed nothing. A small sigh escaped Oliver's lips, but he didn't stir. They walked to Oliver's bedroom, where Natalie carefully drew back the blanket so Jackson could lay him down. He pressed a fleeting kiss to Oliver's forehead, emotion shining in his eyes. Natalie brushed a lock of hair from Oliver's face, her heart pounding at the intimacy of sharing this parental duty with Jackson. When they left the room, she quietly closed the door partway. They returned to the living room in a hush, aware of how pivotal this evening had been. "Thank you," Jackson said, voice raw. "That was more than I ever hoped for." She smiled, fighting back tears. "He's already so fond of you," she whispered. "You have a natural connection." He exhaled, a tremor passing through him. "I feel it too. Every time I look at him, I see parts of myself. But more than that, I just see this amazing kid, happy, smart, kind. You raised him so well, Natalie." Her cheeks heated. "Thank you," she replied softly, swirling with equal parts pride and lingering guilt. "I guess the question is, what now?" Jackson nodded, gaze drifting to the closed door of Oliver's room. "I'd like to keep getting to know him, slowly. And, if you'll allow it, I'd like to help provide for him. School fees, savings for his future. I'm not trying to bulldoze in and overshadow what you've done, but I want to be involved, in any way you feel comfortable." Natalie bit her lip, the magnitude of that offer sinking in. Accepting help meant letting go of her fierce independence, the identity she'd molded for herself as a single mother. But seeing Oliver asleep in Jackson's arms moments ago, she realized how much Oliver deserved this, deserved to have both parents in his life, if Jackson proved consistently trustworthy. After a contemplative pause, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "We'll figure it out together, step by step." Relief crossed Jackson's face. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, each deeply aware of the fragile bond forming between them. Eventually, he glanced at his watch. "It's getting late," he admitted. "I should probably go." She walked him to the door and he hesitated on the threshold. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly. "Dinner, time with Oliver, everything. It was really special." Natalie offered a gentle smile. "I'm glad," she murmured. "Drive safe." He nodded, stepping into the hallway. Before the door closed, he turned back, voice barely above a whisper. "See you soon." And with that, he was gone. Natalie eased the door shut, leaning against it with a shaky exhale. This day had been an emotional whirlwind unlike any she'd known. Yet for all the uncertainty, something new glimmered in her heart, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could create a life where Oliver thrived, where Natalie found solace, and where Jackson discovered the home he never realized he'd been missing. The next morning, Natalie woke to the soft beams of sunlight that crept through her bedroom curtains. She turned onto her side, momentarily forgetting the monumental changes that had upended her life in the last few days. But the memory of Jackson sitting on her couch, reading Oliver a bedtime story, came rushing back, igniting a blend of awe and dread in her chest. She couldn't help but wonder, was it all too good to be true? A murmured "Mom" drifted from the hallway. Oliver padded into her room wearing his pajamas with a cartoon dinosaur emblazoned across the front. He clutched his stuffed brachiosaurus to his chest. "Morning, sweetie," Natalie said with a soft smile. She patted the bed, inviting him to join her under the covers. Oliver hopped in, snuggling against her side. "I had a dream," he announced, "that Mr. Jackson took me to a big park with roller coasters, and we had cotton candy, blue and pink. Then we went home, and you made us spaghetti." Natalie let out a warm laugh. "That sounds like quite the adventure," she said, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. She felt a pang, realizing just how easily her son's imagination had inserted Jackson into their everyday life. She wondered if the real future they were building might live up to Oliver's childlike dreams. He wrinkled his nose. "But it was only a dream. Mom, is Jackson gonna come back soon?" She paused, treading carefully. "Yes, honey. He wants to see more of you. He really likes spending time with you." Oliver grinned. "Cool," he said simply, sliding off the bed to rummage for clothes in his dresser. Natalie watched him with a maternal ache, torn between gratitude and guilt that she'd gone so long without giving him a father figure. Perhaps now was her chance to fix that, if Jackson truly was committed to being in Oliver's life. She got up, roused herself for the day, shower, quick breakfast, a glance at her phone. She half expected to see a text from Jackson, but her screen was quiet. Trying not to overthink, she dressed for work, dropped Oliver at school, and went about her job at a local design studio, where she spent hours editing layouts for small business clients. As she sipped her coffee at a desk cluttered with swatches and color proofs, she found her mind wandering to Jackson's world, a glittering domain of board meetings and international conference calls. Just as she was finalizing a draft, her phone buzzed. She picked it up with a hopeful flutter in her chest. "Jackson. Hey, hope your morning's going well. Wanted to check if you and Oliver might be free this weekend. Maybe we can do something fun, like a museum or a park. Let me know what you think." A tiny smile tugged at her lips. Jackson was diving in wholeheartedly, wanting to spend time with Oliver beyond their quiet dinners. She tapped out a quick response. "Natalie. Morning. That sounds nice. Oliver would love the Science Museum downtown. Let me see what time works, and I'll let you know." Jackson's reply arrived almost immediately. "Jackson. Great. I'll clear my Saturday. Looking forward to it." Natalie slipped her phone back into her purse, heart thumping with cautious optimism. She returned to her design work, though her focus was uneven. Part of her brain lingered on the image of Jackson walking hand in hand with Oliver through museum exhibits, pointing out dinosaur bones or rocket displays. Would Oliver see it simply as a friendly outing, or would he begin to piece together the truth about who Jackson really was? When she picked Oliver up that afternoon, she mentioned the museum idea. His eyes lit up as if she'd announced a trip to the moon. "Can Jackson come too?" he asked, confirming again how quickly the boy was taking to him. She ruffled his hair. "He was the one who suggested it," she said. And Oliver's face practically glowed with excitement. That Saturday dawned cool and clear, the perfect weather for a day out in the city. Natalie dressed Oliver in comfortable clothes and packed a small backpack with snacks, tissues, and a light jacket. She tried not to overdo it, but her mom instincts demanded she be prepared for anything, especially since Oliver would be exploring with Jackson for the first time in a more public setting. A punctual ring at the apartment's buzzer signaled Jackson's arrival. When Natalie opened the door, he was there, casual in jeans and a lightweight jacket, carrying a small bag in which Oliver soon discovered a second windbreaker, just in case he got cold, Jackson explained. "Hi, buddy," he greeted Oliver, bending down to the child's level. "You ready for a big day at the museum?" "Yeah!" Oliver cried, bounding forward with unbridled enthusiasm. He immediately began telling Jackson all about the dinosaur exhibits he'd seen on his last school field trip. Jackson listened, nodding intently, as though Oliver's descriptions were the most fascinating stories in the world. Natalie locked the apartment behind them, feeling that familiar swirl of cautious hope. Together, the three piled into Jackson's SUV. Natalie buckled Oliver into the booster seat in the back. A recent addition, Jackson explained, that he'd insisted his driver pick up. "You sure you're comfortable driving yourself?" Natalie asked quietly. Noting the absence of Jackson's usual chauffeur, he nodded, turning the key in the ignition. "I want this time to feel normal, just us, not an entourage," he answered, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror where Oliver sat. "I gave my driver the day off." The statement hung in the air, highlighting Jackson's effort to distance himself from the billionaire lifestyle for Oliver's sake. They set off through the city streets, weaving among traffic toward the downtown museum district. From the back seat, Oliver peppered them with chatter, occasionally bursting into random observations about the colors of cars or the shape of buildings. Natalie responded with gentle laughs while Jackson shot her a quick, grinning glance as though savoring every innocent question from the little boy. Parking at the museum was surprisingly uneventful. Jackson and Natalie flanked Oliver as they made their way to the entrance, the child scampering ahead with bright eyes. Inside, glass-paneled ceilings flooded the foyer with sunlight, and colorful banners advertised a new ancient sea creatures exhibit. Oliver nearly bounced with excitement, tugging both adults in that direction. As they roamed the exhibits, Jackson snapped a few discreet photos of Oliver marveling at the displays, though he seemed careful not to post anything publicly or draw attention. At one point, they reached the sprawling dinosaur hall where a life-sized T-Rex skeleton towered overhead. Oliver stared up in awe, mouth agape. "It's huge!" he exclaimed, beckoning Jackson closer. The billionaire crouched beside him, reading the information plaque in a low whisper. With each fact about the dinosaur's size or diet, Oliver's fascination grew. Natalie stood a few steps behind, observing. She couldn't help but be moved by how seamlessly Jackson had slipped into the role of caretaker. He'd always been charismatic, but she noticed a tenderness she hadn't seen in their brief relationship years ago. A softness in his tone, the rapt attention he gave Oliver's every word. The sight made her heart clench with both regret and hope. They ventured further, exploring each themed section. Oliver insisted on seeing the space exhibit next, pointing out model rockets and planetary dioramas. "Mommy used to read me books about astronauts," he told Jackson proudly, grabbing the older man's hand without hesitation. Jackson's eyes glimmered, as if each small gesture from Oliver was a gift he cherished. Eventually, hunger pangs led them to the museum cafe. Over sandwiches and fruit smoothies, Oliver chattered about which exhibits had been his favorite so far. Then, out of nowhere, he paused, regarding Jackson with an inquisitive tilt of his head. "How come you don't have kids already?" Oliver asked innocently. Natalie froze, nearly choking on her sip of water. She shot Jackson an apologetic glance. This was the kind of spontaneous, direct question only a child would ask. Jackson, to his credit, managed to smile, although she could see the flicker of emotion in his eyes. "Well," he said slowly, "I guess I was just waiting to meet the right person." Oliver nodded as though that made perfect sense. "You can share me," he declared, biting into his sandwich. "I don't mind." Natalie felt her cheeks warm, aware that Jackson was blinking back tears. He gave Oliver a soft grin. "That means a lot, buddy. I'd love to spend time with you. Thank you for letting me." A hush fell over their corner of the cafe. Natalie sensed Jackson was grappling with the urge to tell Oliver the truth. She herself felt compelled to step in, but she wasn't sure how to navigate that crucial moment. Although they had agreed to handle it gradually, Oliver's innocent acceptance made her wonder if the boy would adapt swiftly to the revelation of fatherhood. They let the topic pass for now. After lunch, the three strolled through the museum's gift shop. Oliver's eyes lit up at the row of dinosaur figurines and plush toys. Jackson purchased a small T-Rex stuffed animal, insisting that Oliver should have a souvenir to remember their outing. "It's so you never forget how huge that real one was," Jackson joked, handing over the plush. which Oliver named Rexy on the spot. As the afternoon wore on, they finally stepped outside into the bright sunlight. Oliver dozed in the car ride home, lulled by the excitement and the gentle hum of the engine. Natalie watched him from the passenger seat, occasionally meeting Jackson's gaze in the rearview mirror. Neither spoke much, but the silence was comfortable, laced with mutual understanding. Oliver roused when they pulled up to Natalie's apartment. "We're here already?" he mumbled sleepily, clutching his new stuffed dinosaur. As Jackson opened the SUV door, Oliver hopped down, yawning. "Thanks for the best day ever," he said, eyes shining as he wrapped Jackson's leg in a spontaneous hug. Jackson ruffled Oliver's hair, swallowing emotion. "Anytime, kiddo. We'll do more stuff like this soon." Inside the apartment, Oliver scampered off to his bedroom to show his stuffed dinosaur its new home. That left Natalie and Jackson standing in the living area once again, the echoes of the day's happiness still hovering in the air. She offered Jackson a grateful smile. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "He had a blast. I did too." Jackson nodded. "It was incredible. I didn't think being around a child could feel so natural, especially since it's new to me. But with Oliver, it's just easy." His voice wavered, and Natalie noticed his hands trembling slightly. He was clearly overwhelmed, grappling with the profundity of the connection he was forging. She gently touched his arm, a comforting gesture that reminded her of the intimacy they'd once shared. "He's easy to love," she said, voice unsteady. Jackson's gaze dropped to where her hand rested. She could sense his emotions battling beneath the surface. Longing, regret, perhaps a quiet joy. "I want to tell him," he whispered, meeting her eyes. "Maybe not this second, but soon. I can't keep pretending I'm just some friend." Natalie exhaled, heart pounding. "I know," she replied, her own voice thick. "I've been thinking about it too. He's so open, so trusting. It might be easier now before he starts wondering more." They paused, standing inches apart, the memories and the new hopes swirling between them. Finally, Natalie nodded. "Let's give it a few more weeks, see how he adjusts. Then, we'll sit down together and tell him." Jackson's lips curved in a soft, grateful smile. "Thank you." Before the tension could grow overwhelming, Oliver dashed back in, brandishing the T-Rex plush and babbling excitedly about how it was the best toy he'd ever had. The moment neatly broke the intensity, and the adults shifted into an easy calm, listening to the child's effusive gratitude. Within minutes, Jackson said his goodbyes, promising to text about their next outing. As Natalie closed the door behind him, she released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Glancing down at Oliver, whose joy radiated from every pore, she felt more certain than ever that this path, though fraught with challenges, was the right one. They had taken another step toward forging a real family bond, however unconventional. And in the quiet hush of the evening, Natalie allowed herself to hope that soon Oliver would understand that the man who read him bedtime stories and took him to see dinosaurs wasn't just a friendly visitor, but the father who would stand by him forever. Natalie stood in the kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon, gazing out the window as she waited for the pasta water to boil. A light drizzle fell against the glass, transforming the city outside into a haze of muted blues and grays. She breathed in the comforting steam that rose from the pot, trying to steady her nerves. It had been 2 weeks since their trip to the Science Museum. 2 weeks of Jackson quietly weaving himself into Oliver's routine. With Natalie's cautious blessing, Jackson picked Oliver up from kindergarten once or twice a week. They'd stop by a local park or sometimes a small cafe for hot chocolate, returning home with new drawings and Oliver's gleeful retellings of their mini adventures. Natalie couldn't deny how much these visits lit up her son's life. At night, she'd catch him hugging the stuffed T-Rex Jackson had bought, whispering his day's highlights as if the toy might relay them back to his new grown-up friend. But for Natalie, each day also brought a growing sense of unease. She still worried about whether Jackson's entire world might crash through the fragile bubble of privacy she'd built for herself and Oliver. Jackson, despite his gentler demeanor now, remained an immensely powerful public figure. How long until the press discovered he was forging a bond with a secret 5-year-old son? How long until skeptics and busybodies started prying at her door? She wasn't sure. But each evening, Jackson left Oliver with a promise to see him soon, and Oliver beamed with newfound confidence, hugging his mother and babbling about the next outing. Natalie tried to focus on that joy, the immediate happiness Oliver exuded whenever Jackson was around. As she drained the pasta, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen to see a message from Jackson. Jackson. Hey, hope you and Oliver are doing well. Just confirmed a small philanthropic event for Price Industries next week. It's a kid-focused charity, and I'm making a donation in Oliver's name. Wanted to invite you both, if you're comfortable. Natalie paused, heart fluttering. A public event, even if it was small, sounded daunting. She typed back tentatively, Natalie, that's really thoughtful. But are you sure it won't draw attention? A few seconds later, her phone buzzed again. Jackson, we'll keep it low-key, but I'd love for Oliver to see how giving back can be fun. There'll be games and crafts for the kids, plus it's a chance to show him a little of what my company does. No formal introductions, no big press releases. Your call, of course. She bit her lip. The idea stirred conflicting feelings. Part of her wanted to shield Oliver from anything remotely corporate or high society, but another part recognized this might be Jackson's gentle way of blending the personal and public spheres, showing Oliver there was more to Mr. Jackson than after-school outings. Natalie, let me think on it. Thank you for including him. We'll talk tonight. She set her phone aside. In truth, she was leaning toward saying yes. Oliver would probably love the crafts and games, and maybe it was time she and Jackson tested the waters of being seen together in a semi-public environment. The longer they tiptoed around in secret, the more suspicious it might look if the truth eventually surfaced. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Oliver called from the living room. Natalie shook off her swirling thoughts and brought the pasta to the table. While Oliver slurped noodles, she gently broached the subject. "So Jackson mentioned a kids' charity event next week," she said, watching him for a reaction. "He might have a few fun things planned there, games, crafts. Would you want to go, sweetie?" Oliver's eyes lit up. "Yeah, that sounds cool. Then maybe Jackson can see me paint a dinosaur again. Remember that T-Rex I painted in class?" Natalie nodded, her chest tightening at how comfortable Oliver was with the idea. She ruffled his hair. "All right, well, we'll see how it goes. We have to talk about it with him first." He grinned, returning to his dinner. Natalie listened to him chatter about his day, forging a silent resolve. She would attend the event with Oliver, but only under conditions that kept their privacy intact. She owed her child a chance to see what Jackson's world looked like, without the glare of paparazzi flashbulbs in his face. 3 days later, Natalie and Oliver found themselves stepping into the gleaming lobby of Price Industries for the very first time. Jackson had invited them to meet him at his office so they could all ride together to a local children's center where the philanthropic event was being set up. Natalie's heart pounded at the sight of the skyscraper. Sleek glass panels soared into the sky, reflecting the city in shimmering distortions. It felt like stepping onto another planet compared to her cozy apartment. Oliver, on the other hand, was full of boyish wonder. "Mommy, look at that fountain!" he exclaimed, pointing to a modern sculpture in the lobby's center. Water cascaded down steel rods, forming patterns that made him giggle. As they approached the reception desk, a polished-looking woman greeted them with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Roberts. Mr. Price is expecting you. You and your son can head right up to the 30th floor." Natalie thanked her, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. An elevator ride later, the doors opened to a plush executive suite. The decor screamed sophistication: pristine marble floors, understated modern art, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline from floor-to-ceiling windows. Natalie kept a hand on Oliver's shoulder, not wanting him to wander off in a place that felt this expensive. Before she could ask for directions, Jackson appeared from around a corner, wearing a neatly tailored suit and an easy grin. His face lit up the instant he saw Oliver, who waved enthusiastically. "Hey, buddy," Jackson said, kneeling to give Oliver a quick hug. "Welcome to my work. I'm sorry it's not as fun as the museum, but we won't stay long." Oliver peered around, eyes wide. "It's super tall," he whispered, sounding more awed than bored. Jackson chuckled, then straightened, meeting Natalie's gaze with warmth. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly, offering a light touch at her elbow that made her heart skip. "I promise we'll keep this quick. Then we can head over to the event and let Oliver run wild with the crafts." He led them through a corridor lined with offices. A few employees glanced their way curiously but said nothing. Clearly, Jackson had good control over who asked questions around here. In his corner office, the view was even more striking. A panoramic sweep of the city that made cars below look like toy miniatures. Oliver pressed his nose to the glass, breathing an odd, "wow." Natalie smiled softly. "It's beautiful," she told Jackson, who stood behind a polished desk. He nodded. "Sometimes I forget to appreciate it," he admitted. "Work gets too busy, but when I see Oliver's excitement, it reminds me to slow down." Glancing at the child, Jackson lowered his voice. "I just need to make one quick call, then we can go. Julia's preparing the car." No more than 10 minutes later, they were back in the elevator, heading down to the parking garage. Oliver tugged Jackson's hand, pointing out how many buttons the elevator had, a trivial detail that Jackson seemed to find fascinating in that moment, perhaps because it kept Oliver smiling. Natalie watched them interact, feeling a glimmer of contentment. Maybe this was the calm before any storm. For now, it felt good. The Children's Center was located just outside the busy downtown core, in a more residential neighborhood. Colorful balloons decorated the entrance, and cheerful music echoed from inside. A modest crowd had gathered, mostly local families, plus a handful of Price Industries volunteers wearing company T-shirts. Jackson slipped on one himself over his dress shirt, a comically mismatched ensemble that made Oliver giggle. Natalie bit her lip, scanning the perimeter for cameras. She spotted a single local news station's van in the parking lot. Tension rose in her chest. "There's media here," she murmured, leaning toward Jackson. His expression grew serious. "They're covering the charity in a general sense," he assured her. "No one's expecting you or Oliver. I haven't briefed them on anything personal." Gently, he added, "But if you're uncomfortable, I understand. I can have staff keep them at bay." She exhaled slowly. "I trust you," she said, searching his face to confirm he meant it. He did. "Just, please, no names or pictures of Oliver in the press, okay?" Jackson gave a firm nod. "Of course." Inside, the event brimmed with kid-friendly stations, face painting, a small bouncy house, arts and crafts tables. Oliver's eyes sparkled at every turn. Volunteers guided children through each activity, praising their creativity. Jackson introduced Natalie to a few Price Industries colleagues, carefully calling her a close friend and letting her decide how much to say. Most greeted her warmly, more focused on the cause at hand than their boss's personal life. At the arts and crafts corner, Oliver dove into painting, giggling as he dabbled bright colors onto a cardboard cutout of a rocket ship. Natalie knelt beside him, holding the palette while he carefully dabbed blues and reds. Jackson crouched on Oliver's other side, whispering playful suggestions that had Oliver squealing with laughter. "Let's add stars! Every rocket needs stars!" Nearby, a local reporter interviewed one of the event organizers. Natalie stiffened upon noticing the camera pivot, capturing background footage that momentarily included them. But Jackson's assistant, Julia, discreetly stepped in, redirecting the camera operator with a polite request for shots of the main stage area instead. The moment passed with minimal fuss. Throughout the afternoon, Jackson mingled with staff and kids, distributing warm smiles and quiet words of thanks. Natalie kept Oliver close but allowed Jackson to show him around. It was simultaneously surreal and comforting to see the father of her child in this philanthropic role. He seemed genuinely passionate, not just going through motions for the sake of PR. Later, there was a short ceremony on a small stage where a representative from the Children's Center thanked Price Industries for their donation. Jackson, holding Oliver's hand, stepped up briefly to accept a plaque on behalf of his company. The audience clapped, and Oliver beamed, having no real idea what the ceremony meant, but thrilled to be included. Natalie stood at the back, heart pounding with pride and nerves. With each flash of a camera from the crowd, she fought the urge to duck behind someone taller. Yet all attention remained on the philanthropic angle, on Jackson's generosity, not on Oliver's identity. By the event's end, Oliver was tuckered out, yawning as he clutched his painted rocket and a balloon animal. Jackson gently lifted him into his arms, the child's head drooping on Jackson's shoulder. Natalie, seeing them like that, felt a rush of warmth. She'd never imagined a day when her child would be so comfortably leaning on the man she'd once thought too distant and powerful to be part of their everyday life. "Thank you," she whispered to Jackson as they made their way to the exit. This was good. For him. For everyone. He cradled Oliver carefully. "It was," he agreed. "I hope we can do more. There's so much I want to share with him. And with you." She nodded, a pang of gratitude laced with trepidation. "Me too," she said, a slight tremor in her voice. Because for the first time she allowed herself to truly envision a future where Jackson was more than a fleeting presence, where he was a father at Oliver's side and perhaps something more for her as well. They stepped into the late afternoon sun, the child's center behind them, uncertain of what obstacles or revelations might lie ahead. But as Jackson and Natalie helped Oliver into the SUV, the boy's sleepy smile was all the confirmation they needed that, for this day at least, they had found a pocket of peace and belonging. Together. A week slid by in an unusually calm blur, punctuated by quiet dinners at Natalie's apartment and after-school ice cream runs orchestrated by Jackson. It was as if they were savoring the last days of summer before the leaves began to turn. The world around them, too, seemed momentarily at ease. No headlines, no photographers lurking behind parked cars. And in that brief span of normalcy, Oliver thrived. Every day he returned from kindergarten asking, "Is Jackson coming over today?" Or, "When will we go out again?" Each time, Natalie found herself simultaneously relieved and anxious, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. By Thursday, the phone calls started. Natalie received the first anonymous tip-off late in the afternoon while she was at her design studio. The call was from a blocked number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but a nagging feeling made her answer. A man's voice, smooth but insistent, crackled through. "Ms. Roberts, I'm calling regarding some interesting news about you and Jackson Price." Her stomach clenched, heart banging against her ribs. She forced her tone to remain calm. "Who is this?" "A reporter," he answered curtly. "And I'd like to confirm certain rumors, specifically about a child." She cut him off, voice trembling but resolute. "I'm sorry, you have the wrong person," she lied, then ended the call. Her hand shook as she locked her phone and returned it to her pocket. She'd known this moment might come, but it still sent a jolt of dread through her. She sat for a moment at her desk, pressing fingertips to her temples, trying to steady her breathing. The best she could do was to remain vigilant and warn Jackson. That evening, after she'd picked Oliver up and served him a quick dinner, she waited for Jackson by the curb, nerves thrumming. He was supposed to take Oliver for a short walk in the local park. When he arrived, stepping from the black SUV, he immediately sensed her tension. "Everything okay?" he asked in a low voice, glancing at Oliver, who was, as ever, chipper and oblivious. "Just got a strange call," she muttered under her breath, ushering Oliver ahead so he wouldn't hear. "A reporter, asking questions about you, about a child." I denied it, of course. Jackson's lips pressed into a thin line. "Did they say who they worked for?" She shook her head. "Blocked number. Sounded like an independent journalist, maybe. Or someone fishing for a tabloid lead." He exhaled slowly, massaging the back of his neck. "All right, let's not panic. We'll keep an eye out. My PR team can field inquiries if it escalates. For now, I'll be extra cautious, especially in public." Despite his outward calm, she could see tension tighten the corners of his eyes. The two of them ushered Oliver to the car and made their way to the park. It was a pleasant evening, the sun dropping low in the sky, casting everything in gold. At the playground, Oliver dashed off to climb a bright green jungle gym, calling for Jackson to follow. Natalie and Jackson sat on a nearby bench, watching Oliver navigate the monkey bars. A swirl of laughter and children's chatter filled the park. "We should talk about telling him soon," Jackson said quietly, not taking his eyes off Oliver. "He's already so attached. And if rumors start swirling, I don't want him to find out from someone else." Natalie nodded, chewing her lower lip. "I know. We can't wait forever. She paused, swallowing. "I want to make sure we do it in a way that won't scare him or feel like we've been lying." Jackson's gaze was gentle when he finally turned to her. "We'll do it carefully. We'll make sure he knows how loved he is, how none of this changes who he is or how we feel. But he deserves the truth." She squeezed his hand in silent agreement. In the glow of dusk, that moment felt delicate yet resolute, as if they were forging a new path for Oliver's sake, no matter what obstacles lurked beyond the horizon. The weekend came, and the air grew crisp with the first hints of fall. Natalie invited Jackson for a Saturday lunch at her apartment, a casual meal of homemade soup and sandwiches. Oliver had spent the morning racing toy cars around the living room, occasionally beckoning Jackson over to show him stunts. The child's adoration for Jackson was written in every squeal of laughter and expectant gaze. After the lunch plates were cleared, Natalie gathered her courage. "Oliver!" she called. The boy came bounding over, a half-built Lego structure in his hands. "Honey, can you sit with us for a second? We want to talk to you about something important." His brow crinkled, but he plopped down on the sofa next to her, Jackson occupying the seat to Oliver's other side. Natalie took a breath, exchanging a brief, supportive look with Jackson. "Remember how you asked if Jackson had kids, and he said he was waiting for the right person?" Natalie began gently. Oliver nodded, wide-eyed. She continued, voice steadier than she felt. "Well, there's something we want you to know. Jackson he's more than just a friend. He's actually your dad." Oliver blinked, eyes flicking from Natalie to Jackson. For a moment, the living room fell silent, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "My, dad?" Oliver echoed, sounding neither upset nor overjoyed. More than anything, he seemed puzzled. "But why didn't you say so before?" Natalie's heart squeezed painfully. "It's complicated, sweetie. We weren't together when you were born, and—" She trailed off, unsure how much to reveal about adult misunderstandings and fear. "I thought it was safer to wait." Oliver frowned. "You're not in trouble, are you?" His voice wavered with childlike concern. I like Jackson. If he's my dad, that's cool, right?" Jackson leaned closer, resting a hand on Oliver's knee. "It's absolutely cool," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry I wasn't there earlier, didn't know about you, but I'm here now and I want to stay in your life as long as you'll have me." He offered a trembling smile that lit up his eyes. The child looked at him thoughtfully. "So does this mean we can do dad stuff, like baseball or—" Natalie let out a shaky laugh of relief. Yes, definitely. Baseball or anything else you want, if that's okay with Jackson. Jackson nodded emphatically, a tear slipping down his cheek before he could hide it. Oliver noticed, his gaze softening. Are you sad, Dad? That single word, Dad, caught Jackson so off guard he couldn't speak for a second. He managed to shake his head. No, buddy, I'm really happy, just a little overwhelmed. Oliver nodded, seemingly satisfied with that explanation. He turned the Lego piece in his hands, then placed it gently on the coffee table. So, does that mean we live together now? Or do you still have your own place, Dad? Natalie and Jackson exchanged a look. We'll figure that out, Natalie said carefully, brushing a lock of hair from Oliver's forehead. We're still taking it one step at a time, but you'll see Jackson whenever we can make it work, okay? He mulled it over, then gave a definitive nod. Okay, he said simply. In a child's direct way, he accepted the news with minimal fuss. Do I call you Dad now, or Jackson? Jackson's breath caught. If you want to call me Dad, you can, he said, voice trembling. But it's totally up to you. Oliver stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. I like Dad. He slid off the couch, took Jackson's hand, and tugged him toward the scattered toy cars. Want to race with me, Dad? Jackson shot Natalie a glance of pure, tearful joy before allowing Oliver to tow him away. Natalie blinked back her own tears, her chest swelling with relief. She'd imagined meltdown scenarios or confusion that might last for days, but Oliver's biggest question seemed to be about continuing their normal routine, just with Dad included. Still, beneath her relief, the memory of that reporter's call lingered. They'd crossed one major hurdle, but she knew others lay ahead. Sure enough, the next hurdle arrived sooner than expected. Early the following week, Jackson's assistant, Julia, called Natalie. Hi, Ms. Roberts. I wanted to let you know that a gossip site reached out to Price Industries for comment, she explained, sounding businesslike but empathetic. They claim to have photos of you, Jackson, and a young boy leaving your apartment on multiple occasions. They're asking questions about the child's identity. Natalie's stomach dropped. So it was happening. She swallowed hard. What did you tell them? I referred them to our legal counsel and said we have no statement at this time, Julia replied. But we wanted you to be aware. This outlet has a reputation for sensationalism. Wrapping her free arm around her waist, Natalie fought off a wave of panic. So, are they going to publish something? They might try. The best approach, from a PR standpoint, is not to comment on specifics. Starve them of any official confirmation, Julia advised. Still, I understand if you're feeling uneasy. Jackson wants you to know he'll protect Oliver's privacy at all costs. After the call ended, Natalie paced her living room, palms damp. In the years she'd spent raising Oliver, she'd managed to avoid major conflicts or drama. Now everything threatened to unravel. Oliver was barely adjusting to the knowledge that Jackson was his father, and the last thing he needed was to see it plastered across tabloids. She texted Jackson. Natalie, Julia told me about the gossip site. Are we sure ignoring them is best? I'm worried they'll spin it any way they want. He responded within minutes. Jackson, we can't stop them from speculating, but if we stay silent, they have less ammo. If it gets worse, we'll fight back legally, I promise. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. There was no easy solution. Jackson's money and influence might help shield them, but she resented that any of this was necessary. Oliver had only just begun calling him Dad. She didn't want some sensationalist headline to steal that fragile new happiness. Over the next few days, a tense lull fell over them all, each waiting to see if the gossip site would publish the rumored exposé. Jackson's PR team prepared in the background, while Natalie tried to maintain a normal routine for Oliver. The boy, blissfully unaware of adult turmoil, threw himself into kindergarten art projects and excitedly shared them with Dad whenever Jackson visited. One evening, while Oliver was asleep, Jackson and Natalie sat side by side on the couch, the day's worry etched on their faces. "I hate feeling helpless," Natalie admitted, hugging a cushion to her chest. "Like any stranger with a camera can just show up and turn our lives upside down." Jackson laid a reassuring hand on her knee. "I know. I'm used to paparazzi, but it's different now that Oliver's involved. That's why I have security people, attorneys, whatever it takes." He paused. "But I also wonder if we should address it directly. Maybe not a public statement, but we can't hide forever." Natalie's eyes welled with tears. "I just want Oliver's life to stay normal. Is that too much to ask?" He softly pulled her into his arms, letting her rest her head against his chest. "No, it's not. We'll do everything we can to protect that normalcy. You have my word." Outside, the city hummed with its usual nocturnal buzz, headlights dancing across windows. Inside, they sat in silence, the flickering warmth of the lamp casting shadows on the wall. Despite the swirl of fears, a quiet comfort wrapped around them. They were in this together, forging a unity neither had anticipated, for the sake of the little boy who now called Jackson Dad. And so, in that hush, they resolved to stand firm, no matter what stories surfaced or how many phone calls from blocked numbers might come. They would face the spotlight as a fledgling family, determined not to let rumors destroy what they were building. In Oliver's bedroom, the gentle rise and fall of the child's breathing testified to all that was at stake, the promise of a secure, loving home they were finally creating, one day at a time. 5 days passed without any sensational headlines, no public revelations, no photos splashed across tabloids. Natalie began to hope that perhaps the gossip site had moved on to some other story, or decided the tip wasn't juicy enough to print. Oliver's life remained blessedly normal. Playdates with classmates, a growing bond with Jackson, and bedtime stories that left him happily dozing off with his beloved stuffed T-Rex. Yet the uneasy calm felt fragile, like a quiet before a storm. Jackson tried to reassure Natalie that his PR team had everything under control, but she caught traces of tension in his eyes whenever he dropped by in the evenings. Then, on a bright Wednesday morning, the dam finally broke. Natalie awoke to a text from her friend Rita, one of the few people who knew about Oliver's paternity. The message was frantic. "Rita, have you seen this? They've got a whole article about Jackson. Secret child. Pictures of you and Oliver. It's on a gossip site called Insider Buzz. I'm so sorry, Nat." Natalie's stomach plummeted. With trembling fingers, she opened her browser. Sure enough, the lurid headline stared back. Billionaire Jackson Price's hidden family? New photos spark questions about mystery woman and child? The article featured blurry shots, some of her and Oliver entering Jackson's SUV, others of Jackson walking into her apartment building. They cleverly angled Oliver's face so it was partially visible. Though the child's name wasn't mentioned, the piece dripped with speculation, implying that Jackson had a secret lover and an illegitimate heir. Words like alleged and unconfirmed were peppered throughout, but the intent was unmistakable: to ignite scandalous gossip. Natalie's blood roared in her ears. She scrolled down, heart pounding, reading how the site had contacted Price Industries for comment, but received no direct answers. There were references to anonymous sources claiming Jackson had been seen spending significant time with the boy. She didn't realize she was crying until she felt warm tears drip onto her phone screen. Fear, anger, and helplessness converged in her chest, making it hard to breathe. How would Oliver handle this if his classmates found out? How would she protect him from the cruelty of public scrutiny? Almost on cue, her phone lit up with Jackson's name. She answered, voice shaking. "You saw it." His tone was grim. "Yes. Julia flagged it early this morning. We're working on a response." "A response?" she echoed, tears threatening to return. "What does that even mean? They have pictures, Jackson. Oliver's face might not be crystal clear, but I know. He cut in gently. "This is terrible, and I'm so sorry. Listen, I can release a statement. Something along the lines of, I'm in a private relationship, and we ask for privacy for our family. Or we can try to deny everything, but I don't recommend denial. That'll only fuel more speculation." She shut her eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter. "I just want them to leave us alone," she whispered, voice cracking. "I hate this." Jackson sighed, audible heartbreak in his breath. "Me too. Let me talk to my legal and PR teams. I'll push back hard if they try to reveal Oliver's identity. If you'd rather keep silent, I'll respect that too, but maybe we can say something brief. Confirm we're a family, that Oliver's off limits. You and I can decide the wording." She swallowed, anger momentarily flaring. "It's not fair that we have to do this. But maybe you're right. A short statement might be best. Not feeding them extra details, just establishing boundaries." He paused, then said, "Natalie, I'm going to protect you both. I promise." After the call, she mustered the composure to dress Oliver for school. The child noticed her distress, tilting his head with concern. "Mom, you look sad," he said quietly. Natalie forced a shaky smile, brushing her fingers through his hair. "I'm just worried about grown-up stuff, but we'll figure it out, okay?" She kissed his cheek. "Go get your backpack." Watching Oliver skip off, blissfully unaware of the swirling controversy, Natalie gathered a deep breath. One step at a time, she reminded herself, recalling the vow Jackson had made. They were a family now, and she had to believe they'd weather the storm together. By mid-afternoon, Jackson sent her a draft of the proposed statement from Price Industries. It read, "Mr. Jackson Price values his private life above all else, especially when it involves the well-being of a minor. He confirms that he has recently reconnected with someone special, and they share the joy of caring for a young boy. Mr. Price kindly requests respect and privacy for his family and will not tolerate any infringement on the child's rights or welfare." Natalie read it 3 times, her emotions seesawing between relief and dread. The text was vague, acknowledging Oliver's existence without providing details or fueling more rumors. Ultimately, she typed back a simple reply. "Natalie, this seems okay. Go ahead. Let's hope it quiets things." Within hours, Price Industries released the statement to major outlets. Social media buzzed with reactions, but no major publication delved deeper yet. The day ended with a tense calm, as though the entire city held its breath, waiting to see if bigger news would overshadow the story or if tabloids would double down. The next morning, as Natalie was preparing Oliver's breakfast, she received a call from her boss at the design studio, Caroline. "Hey, Nat." Caroline's tone was apologetic. "I just got a heads up from one of our clients. They recognized you from a gossip piece about Jackson Price. They asked questions about your family situation. I tried to dodge, but I thought you should know. It might affect how comfortable some clients feel. You know, big reputational concerns." Natalie bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. "Are you firing me?" she asked, heart pounding. Caroline sighed. No, not firing. But I do need you to consider working remotely for a bit while this dies down. It's not that I don't support you. Really, I do. But this is a small agency, and we're just not equipped to handle the kind of publicity that might come our way." Tears pricked Natalie's eyes, but she fought to keep her voice steady. "I understand," she said stiffly. "I'll collect my things today." After the call ended, she leaned against the kitchen counter, rage and helplessness flaring again. She'd tried so hard to keep her personal life separate from her job, her professional identity. Now it was bleeding together because of a gossip headline. She gathered herself enough to serve Oliver cereal, plastering on a brave face she didn't feel. By the time she dropped him at kindergarten, she was trembling with barely contained frustration. How quickly normal life could unravel under the glare of scandal. She knew Jackson would be furious about this too, but what could he do? Force the design studio to keep her in the office? That might only worsen the narrative that she was specially treated because of her connection to a billionaire. Later that day, Jackson arrived at her apartment unannounced, concern etched on his face. She'd texted him the situation at work, and he clearly hadn't taken it lightly. "I'm so sorry," he said, the moment she opened the door. "I had no idea it would impact your job so soon." She stepped aside, letting him in. "It's not your fault," she managed, rubbing her temples. "It's this tabloid madness, and my boss is just trying to protect the company's reputation." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I can help. I can talk to your boss. Reassure them." Natalie shook her head firmly. "No, that might confirm their worst fears about me getting special treatment. I'll just work from home for a bit. Focus on Oliver." She tried for a brave smile. "At least I still have the job, and clients might forget if the story dies down soon." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Still, this shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be penalized for my public image." She offered a wry, weary chuckle. "It's our image now, apparently." He winced, nodding. "Which is why I'm stepping up security around your building, just in case any paparazzi get aggressive. And I'd like to hire someone to help manage your personal PR, if you're okay with that. Someone who can shield you from further intrusions." The notion made her balk. "Like a personal PR rep?" "Jackson, I'm just a regular person. I don't need that kind of entourage." He sighed. "I understand how it sounds. But if people are already contacting your workplace, showing up in your neighborhood could be next. If you ever need to make a statement or address rumors, you'd have someone on your side. It's about giving you resources." A mix of gratitude and stubborn independence warred within her. She inhaled slowly. "I'll think about it," she said. "But right now, can we just be here for Oliver? Pick him up together? Do something normal?" Jackson's features softened into a small smile. "Of course, let's do that." That evening, the three of them found normalcy by cooking dinner together, a simple homemade pizza. Oliver sprinkled cheese and peppers over the dough with great delight, squealing every time Jackson pretended to swipe the toppings off the pan. As they all sat around the small dining table, munching on slices for a moment, the tension lifted. Oliver chattered about wanting to play soccer in a local league. "Dad, will you come to my games?" he asked, eyes brimming with anticipation. Jackson nodded eagerly. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied, giving the boy a warm grin. Natalie watched them with a tender ache, wishing nothing could mar this newfound closeness. But after Oliver went to bed, she and Jackson returned to the living room, scrolling through their phones in worried silence. News outlets had picked up Price Industries' statement, many praising the mature tone but still speculating about the mother. A few hinted that Natalie had trapped Jackson or sought an instant fortune. Furious tears pricked her eyes again. She'd built her life without his money, never once exploiting the situation for gain. Now the rumors painted her as a gold digger? Jackson gently squeezed her hand. "I know it hurts," he murmured. "If you want me to respond directly, I will. I can clarify that you never asked for a cent." She shook her head firmly. "That might just add fuel. Let them think what they want. The people who matter know the truth." He nodded, a flicker of admiration lighting his gaze. "You're strong," he said softly. "Stronger than I'd be if I were in your position." A fragile peace settled. They both understood that the storm might worsen before it eased. But Oliver's existence wasn't a secret anymore. He was now a public fact, albeit one Natalie and Jackson hoped to protect from the worst intrusions. They bid each other goodnight with a lingering hug at the door. For an instant, Natalie's eyes closed, inhaling the comforting scent of Jackson's cologne, wishing they could freeze time. Outside, the city sparkled under streetlights, oblivious to the emotional roller coaster playing out in a modest apartment. Yet amid the chaos, a small family had begun to take shape. No matter how many cameras flashed or articles spun rumors, They held one unassailable truth: Oliver's happiness was worth every battle. And as they parted that night, both Natalie and Jackson carried the unspoken vow that they would endure the onslaught, trusting that their bond, this fragile, precious thing, would ultimately shine brighter than any headline. The next few weeks slipped by in a swirl of emotions and mixed signals from the outside world. Price Industries' official statement had temporarily slowed the media frenzy, but not stamped it out altogether. Now and then, a speculative piece would pop up online, recycling the same fuzzy photos or old gossip, each article hinting about the mystery mother. None of the big, reputable outlets touched the story, which gave Natalie and Jackson some measure of comfort. Still, local tabloids and clickbait sites continued to circle like sharks sensing blood in the water. Despite the chaos, Oliver's life carried on with a certain sweet normalcy. Jackson came by often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to read a bedtime story. On weekends, he took Oliver to the local park or to watch youth soccer games. Once or twice, he even gave the boy mini driving lessons in the empty parking lot, letting Oliver sit on his lap behind the wheel of the SUV, a comedic display that had Oliver giggling uncontrollably. Whenever the boy fell asleep, Natalie and Jackson would find themselves on the couch, brainstorming ways to shield him from looming public scrutiny. But the strain was starting to wear on Natalie. She'd begun working from home most days, missing the camaraderie of her small design studio. An occasional PR email from Jackson's office would remind her that some shady reporter was still digging, or that a tabloid had posted a minor update. She found herself glancing out the window each time she heard footsteps on the stairwell, worrying it might be an uninvited photographer. The tipping point came on a brisk Friday morning. Natalie was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes for Oliver before school, when she heard a commotion outside. Voices raised, echoing through the thin apartment walls. She moved to the living room window, peering out. A man in plain clothes, wielding a camera, stood at the foot of the building's stairwell, arguing with someone. A second later, she realized the someone was a security guard Jackson had quietly hired to keep watch over the property. Her pulse spiked. "Oliver," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "Stay here, sweetie. Mommy will be right back." She stepped out of the apartment and into the corridor. From the top of the landing, she could see the guard blocking the intruder's path, arms folded. "Ma'am," the guard said, spotting her, "this man claims he has a right to speak with you. I've already told him to leave." The man with the camera turned, eyes glinting with the triumph of a cornered predator. "Ah, Ms. Roberts." He lifted his camera in a single swift motion. Before Natalie could duck back, he snapped a photo. The flash momentarily blinded her. The guard lunged forward, shoving the lens aside. "This is private property," the guard barked, voice brimming with authority. "You have no right." "I'm on a public sidewalk," the man retorted, trying to crane his neck for another shot. "Just want a statement, Ms. Roberts. Is Jackson Price the father of your child?" Natalie's heart thundered. There, spelled out so plainly. The direct question pounded in her ears like a drumbeat. She wanted to scream, to deny him satisfaction. Instead, she swallowed, voice trembling. "Please leave. My child is inside." He took a step back, feigning a veneer of politeness. "Come on. You can clarify a lot of rumors. Some folks say you're only in it for the money. Others say you and Price are planning a quiet wedding to legitimize the kid. Don't you want to set the record straight?" Her cheeks burned hot with a mixture of shame and fury. Wedding? Money? How had it come to this? Before she could form a response, the security guard stepped in again, physically escorting the cameraman off the property line. The man spouted curses but eventually slunk away, presumably satisfied with whatever quick snapshots he'd managed to get. Natalie's legs felt rubbery as she made her way back inside. She found Oliver standing in the living room clinging to the stuffed T-Rex. His eyes were wide with confusion. "Mommy, who was that man?" She knelt, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Just someone who wanted pictures." she answered softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. But he's gone now. Oliver frowned, hugging the plush dinosaur tighter. I don't like pictures, he announced. I'm allowed to say no, right? A pang shot through her chest. Yes, you are, she murmured. You definitely are. Within half an hour, Jackson appeared at the apartment, alerted by the security guard who had relayed the confrontation. He walked in, face etched with worry and anger. Oliver was already off at school by then, so Natalie was alone, curled in the corner of the couch, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. He took photos, she murmured, voice hollow. I don't know if he got Oliver, but he knows where we live now. Jackson sank down beside her, gently taking her hand. She didn't resist. I'm so sorry, he said. Security said they chased him off, but there's no telling if he'll post the pictures he managed to snap. Natalie closed her eyes. We tried to be discreet. It's not enough. They're relentless. He exhaled sharply, his own frustration seeping through. Look, there's an alternative, he said after a brief pause. You two could move, for a while at least. Maybe come stay at my penthouse, it's in a secure building. Private elevator, 24/7 guards, they'd never get near you or Oliver. Her eyes flew open, protests already forming on her lips. Leave our home, that's so drastic. Oliver's school is here, his friends. We can arrange a driver, Jackson said gently, though urgency tinged his tone. Get him to and from school safely. I know it's a big change, but at least you'd be able to sleep at night without worrying about who's lurking downstairs. She wanted to argue, but the memory of that camera flash seared into her mind. She inhaled, overwhelmed. Let me think, please. He nodded. Of course. His hand tightened around hers, gaze dropping in regret. I hate that it's come to this. I told you I'd protect you both, but it feels like every day we're battling a new threat. Natalie shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. You are protecting us, Jackson. We can't stop them from trying. His expression softened, and for a moment, the tension in the room eased. In the hush, she sensed how deeply he cared, how fiercely he wanted to shield their family from gossip and intrusion. He pulled her into a cautious embrace, and she let her head rest on his shoulder, eyes closing as she tried to gather her fraying nerves. The next few days were a blur of logistical discussions. Jackson's team insisted on upgrading the building's security system. They added cameras near every entrance, plus a locked gate that required key code access. A few neighbors grumbled about the added measures, but the landlord approved it, apparently starstruck by Jackson Price's personal involvement. Natalie found the new developments unnerving. Her apartment was turning into something akin to a fortress. But if that was the cost of keeping Oliver safe, she couldn't object. Meanwhile, the paparazzi sightings grew more frequent. Twice Natalie spotted men with long-lens cameras posted across the street, perched behind tinted car windows. The first time she almost panicked, grabbing Oliver and rushing back inside. The second time she told herself to remain calm. If they wanted mundane footage of her carrying groceries, so be it. One evening, after Jackson took Oliver out for ice cream, they pulled into the driveway, headlights illuminating 3 strangers loitering near the stairwell. Before fear could coil around her heart, she saw Jackson's security detail approach, gently but firmly sending the strangers scurrying. Through the windshield, Oliver looked worried. "Why are those guys here again, Dad?" he asked. Jackson offered what reassurance he could. "They're not supposed to be. Our friends in security just reminded them of that." But the shadows that flickered over Jackson's face told Natalie he was tired of these cat-and-mouse games. She recognized a weariness in herself, too, a simmering resentment at the constant vigilance. Oliver was coping for now, but she dreaded the day he realized that the people with cameras were specifically out to exploit his existence. Innocence could shatter so easily. A turning point arrived when Natalie came home from a late grocery run, only to find a small piece of paper tucked under her apartment door. The note read, in cramped handwriting, "I can pay for an exclusive, let's talk. Save yourself the trouble. RT. Her throat went dry. She had no idea who RT was, maybe a reporter's initials or a freelance paparazzo looking to make a quick buck. The message was chilling in its bluntness, as if threatening that the offers would keep coming until she caved. That night, she phoned Jackson, her voice shaking. "I can't do this," she confessed. "Oliver's environment is so tense, I'm always looking over my shoulder. Now they're slipping notes under my door. I hate to uproot his life, but maybe we should accept your offer, at least for a little while until the press moves on." Jackson's relief was palpable through the phone. "I'll arrange everything. You can keep your apartment. We won't break the lease. But I'll set up a space for you and Oliver at my penthouse. We can treat it like a temporary refuge." She closed her eyes, a wave of conflicting relief and guilt rolling over her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry it's come to this. It feels like I'm running away." "You're protecting Oliver," Jackson countered gently. "That's the bravest thing a parent can do." Tears threatened again, but she nodded to herself, as if he could see her. Maybe this was the right path. For weeks, they'd tried to keep Oliver's life unchanged, but the paparazzi's siege left them with few options. As she ended the call, a tired acceptance settled in. For the sake of her son, she was going to step into Jackson's world, at least temporarily, and hope that beyond the plush comfort and security, they'd find a sanctuary free from the glare of prying eyes. And so, on the cusp of another dramatic shift in their lives, Natalie prepared herself for the move, quietly praying that living behind the protective walls of Jackson's penthouse might finally give Oliver a taste of safety and normalcy again. The truth was, if she had to hide from the outside world, she wanted to do it standing side by side with the man who'd become both father to her son and something deeper to her. With Oliver's small hand in hers, she resolved to walk forward, come what may. Natalie's footsteps echoed in the vast marble-floored lobby of Jackson's penthouse building, each step taking her further from the life she'd once known. At her side, Oliver clutched his worn dinosaur plush and gazed around with equal parts excitement and apprehension. They had packed only the essentials, a few suitcases, Oliver's favorite books, and some cherished family photos. Jackson had assured her the penthouse had everything else they might need, but still each item she brought felt like a piece of home she couldn't bear to leave behind. A private elevator whooshed them upward, gliding silently through dozens of floors. Oliver pressed his face against the glass panel, marveling at the city shrinking below. "It's so high, Mom," he breathed, voice tinged with wonder. Natalie forced a smile, trying not to dwell on what this move symbolized. She was worried about how Oliver would adapt, and how she herself would cope in this new, opulent environment. But given the relentless paparazzi and the unwanted intrusions, this arrangement felt like the safest option. At the penthouse entrance, a uniformed guard checked their names off a list, then stepped aside. Jackson stood in the foyer, wearing casual clothes that belied his usual corporate look. Despite the comfortable attire, his expression was taut with concern. He greeted Oliver first, scooping the boy into a warm hug and ruffling his hair. Then his gaze shifted to Natalie, a mix of relief and regret flashing in his eyes. "You made it," he said softly, taking a suitcase from her hand. "Come on in. I promise. This can be your space just as much as mine. We'll do whatever it takes to make you both comfortable." Natalie nodded, swallowing the nerves that threatened to surface. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hushed. She stepped over the threshold, letting her gaze sweep the open-plan living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the skyline, and plush sofas were arranged around a modern fireplace. It was a stark contrast to her modest apartment, with every detail radiating polished luxury. A small voice in her head whispered that she didn't belong here, but she forced the thought aside for Oliver's sake. "This place is so big!" Oliver exclaimed, wide-eyed. He dashed past the couches, the plush T-Rex under his arm. "Dad, can I see my room?" Jackson's face brightened at the term "Dad," and he nodded eagerly. "Of course. I had the staff set up a space just for you. It's down the hall. Follow me." He shot Natalie a quick, encouraging smile, then led Oliver into a hallway where double doors stood ajar. Trailing behind, Natalie felt her stomach twist. They entered a generously sized bedroom, painted in soft neutrals with pops of bright blue accents. A comfortable bed with dinosaur-patterned sheets took center stage, and shelves lined one wall, some already stocked with children's books and art supplies. On a desk by the window, a small reading lamp shaped like a rocket glowed gently. Oliver gasped in delight. "Wow!" he breathed, dropping his plush on the bed and running to the shelves. His fingers trailed over the spines of brand-new storybooks, each likely hand-picked by Jackson or his staff. Then he spun around. "Thank you, Dad. This is awesome." Natalie's eyes prickled. In her imagination, she'd always wanted to provide Oliver with comfort and security, but it was bittersweet to see it manifested here, courtesy of Jackson's wealth. She walked over to Oliver and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You like it?" she asked softly. He nodded so hard his hair bounced. "Yes, it's like a dream." Then, with a sudden bashfulness, he looked at her. "Is this just for a while, Mom? Or are we living here now?" She crouched beside him, exchanging a glance with Jackson. "It's temporary, honey," she explained, voice gentle. "Until things calm down with the people who keep bothering us. But we'll still keep our old apartment, and we'll make sure you can see your friends at school every day." Oliver seemed satisfied by that answer, bouncing onto the bed. Jackson stepped closer, offering Natalie a reassuring look. "Anything you want to change, just say the word," he murmured. "We'll do it." She forced a small smile, nodding. "Thank you." Her gratitude was genuine, even if it was tangled with discomfort at the drastic shift in their lives. Over the next few days, a surprising calm settled around them. The building's strict security measures made it nearly impossible for paparazzi or journalists to loiter. Oliver happily explored the penthouse. He discovered an expansive library, which Jackson had only sparsely used but now lined with children's books. There was also a small home theater, where Oliver begged Jackson to watch movies with him at night. Natalie tried to stay productive, finishing design tasks on her laptop from a quiet nook near a window. She found herself sneaking glances at the skyline, still unable to believe she was living in such surroundings. Yet the anxiety that had shadowed her every step outside was easing, replaced by cautious relief. One evening, Jackson arrived home early from a meeting, tie askew and shoulders tense. He'd been caught in a flurry of corporate dealings, some new acquisition that demanded urgent negotiations. He sank onto the sofa next to Natalie, rubbing his temples. "You'd think it'd be easier to concentrate on business given how many years I've done this," he said with a rueful half-smile. "But all I can think about is whether Oliver's safe, or how you're coping here." Natalie slid a little closer. "We're managing," she assured him softly. "Actually, we're more than managing. Oliver told me this morning he likes being here because he doesn't see people sneaking around with cameras. And I have to admit, I feel safer too." She paused, reaching out to gently squeeze his arm. "Thank you. I know this isn't how you pictured your life either." He shrugged, offering a weary grin. "No, but it's better in a lot of ways. For the first time, I'm not just working for the sake of more profits or expansions. It feels like I have a family, people who actually need me, who love me, not for my money, but for me." Her cheeks warmed at the honesty in his voice. Before she could respond, small footsteps padded across the living room. Oliver appeared wearing dinosaur pajamas, his face lit with excitement. "Dad! Mom! Guess what?" he cried, bounding forward. "Tomorrow is show and tell, and I want to bring my rocket lamp from my new room. Is that okay?" Jackson's tension melted away in a heartbeat. He exchanged a smile with Natalie, then opened his arms. Oliver hopped onto the couch, leaning against Jackson's chest. "That's a great idea," Jackson said. "Sure you want to bring something so special? Just be careful it doesn't break." Oliver nodded earnestly. "I'll be super careful, promise." He glanced at Natalie, who brushed a hand over his hair. The boy beamed, secure in their presence. No cameras, no strangers. Just the three of them in a quiet moment that felt like the essence of home. But their bubble of safety was tested again a week later when a tabloid published a piece claiming to have exclusive details about Jackson's alleged engagement to his secret child's mother. The article was thin on actual facts, but it caused a brief stir on social media. Friends and acquaintances bombarded Natalie with messages, some well-meaning, others just fishing for gossip. Though Jackson's legal team squashed the rumors quickly, issuing a swift denial of any wedding plans, Natalie realized the storm would continue to flare up now and then, like embers in a forest fire. She tried to shield Oliver from the noise. He was happily busy with school and the sense of security offered by Jackson's home. One afternoon, while Jackson was out at a meeting, Natalie was tidying the penthouse when the doorbell chimed. The building security rarely let anyone up without clearance, so her heart quickened. She opened the door to find a delivery man holding a small package. "From Price Industries, ma'am," he said. She accepted it, shutting the door behind her. Inside, she found a note from Julia, Jackson's trusted assistant, plus a sleek binder containing new ID badges for the building, updated passes for restricted floors, and a letter confirming extra benefits at Oliver's school. The letter stated that Price Industries would sponsor a scholarship for Oliver's future extracurriculars, soccer leagues, summer camps, anything he might need to thrive. A wave of emotion flooded Natalie. She sat down at the kitchen island, tears unexpectedly filling her eyes. All these measures were proof of Jackson's resolve to integrate her and Oliver into his life, safeguarding them in ways she'd never even imagined before. Finally, the day came when Oliver asked the inevitable question. "Mom, are we going to stay here for good, or do we have to go back?" His tone was thoughtful, not sad. He'd grown used to seeing Jackson every morning before work and every night at dinner. His new bedroom felt like home, and the paparazzi were a distant memory. Natalie crouched beside him, gently turning him to face her. "We'll see, honey," she said. "Remember how we said it might be temporary? But maybe, if we all like being here, we can figure out a way to make it more permanent." Her voice caught because she sensed how her own reservations had begun to dissolve. She liked waking up in a place where she could breathe without fear of being photographed through her kitchen window. She liked that Jackson was right there for Oliver's bedtime, for random moments of laughter and learning. Oliver nodded slowly, then gave a small grin. "Okay," he said simply, wrapping his arms around her neck. As she hugged him, Natalie spotted Jackson standing in the doorway, wearing an expression of tenderness and quiet relief. He joined them, encircling both mother and child in a warm embrace. "We're a family," Jackson murmured. "We'll keep working through everything, together." Natalie exhaled shakily, pressing her cheek to Oliver's hair. And in that moment, though the city outside still buzzed with rumors and cameras, she felt their closeness form an impenetrable shield. No matter how many headlines tried to sensationalize their story, the truth was simple and profound. Jackson Price had discovered his son, and in the process, they'd all discovered something richer and more sustaining than any fortune, an unbreakable bond, built day by day, grounded in love and unwavering commitment. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.